Greetings, everyone. Good morning, good evening for some of you. Good night, because I see some names of people that are actually so
Bonjour tout le monde.
committed. Bonjour à vous, that are actually so committed that they're connecting from very far away, where it's the middle of the night. So thank you all for being with us today, officially opening this third week of the Academy of Labor on Labor Migration 2025. And I'm very excited about the session today because both today and on Thursday, we're going to be looking at emerging issues. So relatively new topics that we are just starting to understand and unpack the implications for labor migration specifically. So I'm quite confident that the sessions this week are going to be particularly interesting for you all. Just a couple of quick housekeeping announcements as we start the session. As usual, you know that the session is being offered with simultaneous interpretation in English and French. The speakers, so myself and the guest speaker that we have for you today, which I'll introduce in a second, are going to be speaking English throughout the session. But if you would like to listen in French, you should be already experts by now. You can click on the globe icon at the bottom of your screen and select the French channel. You have also the option, if you wish, to activate closed captioning. Again, at the bottom of your Zoom screen in the black bar, you will see a button that says Show Captions, and it's going to show the caption in the language that you are listening to. So if you're on the English channel, you will be seeing the closed captions in English, and vice versa. If you're listening in French, the captions will be in French. As usual, we would like to keep the session as engaging and as interactive as possible. So feel free to share any comments or any reactions or any questions that you may have at any point throughout the session, either in the chat, and we can pick them from the chat box directly, either in English or in French, or you can raise your hand, again, using the taskbar at the bottom of your Zoom screen and using the raise hand function, and then we'll be more than happy to give you the floor. The session today is structured very much as a conversation. I have prepared, as you know by now, we do this. I have prepared a couple of questions to get the conversation started, but we're really looking forward to hearing what you think, what your doubts, what your questions might be. So don't be shy in sharing. We're absolutely looking forward to it. So the topic of the session today revolves around digitalization, which is a buzzword that we've been hearing a lot, more and more, especially in labor migration related spaces and debates. And so what we want to try and do today is, and I say we, but it's really just mostly the guests that we have invited to help guide us through this topic, but really look at the implication and unpack a bit the implication that these push towards digitalization and more digital solutions can have for migrant workers themselves and for, in general, governance frameworks around labor migration. So I'm very happy to introduce to you Professor Hari Harindranath, who is Professor of Information Systems at Royal Holloway at the University of London. Hari, thank you very much for being with us today. And perhaps before we jump into the heart of the session, I will let you maybe say a few words about yourself, your work, to sort of frame the discussion for today. And then maybe once you've done that, you can tell us a bit about what the key challenges are in the use of digital technologies when it comes to labor migration governance. Thank you very much once again, Hadi, and over to you. I cannot hear you. I can
Okay,
see.
the something
I
some
can hear you now. I can hear you now
okay,
loud and clear.
something
Thank you
something
so much.
happened to my
You're off again. Sorry, I can hear you. I can see you talking, but I cannot hear you anymore. You came back for a moment and then you disappeared again. Not, no. So I'm going to suggest one thing maybe because this has worked in the past. You can leave the meeting and then come back. And sometimes this resets the audio settings and it helps. No, because we cannot hear you at all. Okay, he's going to try one more thing, apparently based on my limited capacity to lip read, but perhaps no, still not working at this time. So I'm going to ask you to try maybe two things. Either try without the headset or try to disconnect and reconnect, and we can see if that works. Thank you. Maybe in the meantime, I'm going to take a minute or two. Yes, Marion.
Sorry, greetings to all. I just wanted to say that there is a PowerPoint presentation that unfortunately we couldn't translate to have the two screens for you today. In any case, you will have it on the eCampus by the end of the day. Thank you.
Fantastic, Marion. Thank you for this. We see indeed the presentation on the screen. Heidi, can I ask you to try and check your audio again or your sound again? Because I can see you speaking, but I still cannot hear you. Okay, so again, two things I think that you can try. One is to leave the meeting and come back, or try and join without the headset or bypass the headset in the audio settings. No, I still cannot hear you. I'm so sorry. Okay. So in the meantime, while we do these last minute tests, and feel free to interrupt me at any time and try speaking. I'm just going to fill the void a little bit while we sort out this technical issue. Just a quick reminder to participants. One of the things that we've asked you to do in this online phase is to select or express your preference for which elective course you would like to follow once you are here in Turin. So you have 3 options in the morning and 3 options in the afternoon. Obviously, it won't be able for you to be in 3 places at once. So it's a bit of a difficult choice. I understand that, but I'm going to urge you, those of you who haven't done so yet, to please make a choice on the eCampus. We'll try as much as possible to accommodate your preferences. But just a quick word of caution. I see that some who have expressed their choices have chosen electives that are happening at the same time. So obviously that will not be possible. We will reassign you based on the available spots. The same goes for language issues because we are working to make sure that we can offer 2 out of 3 with interpretations, with simultaneous interpretation, but it will not be possible for sure to offer all 3 of them with interpretation. So I see that, for example, for the afternoon sessions, there is no issue because the Francophone have naturally made a choice that is more conducive to our setup. For the morning, there's still a little bit of confusion. So you can expect that in the next couple of days, we're going to reach out to you via email or via eCampus message to give you more details on the available options in case your choice was not it was not possible for us to accommodate your choice and give you alternatives. In case for any reason you are not able to follow the elective course that you wanted to follow during the face-to-face phase, you will still have the option to complete it in an online format. So nothing really gets lost in the way. It's just a question of accommodating to a different format of learning. So I hope that you will bear with us, and let me thank you in advance for your understanding on this. Aya is asking, are the elective options 2 or 3? There are 3 in the mornings and 3 in the afternoons. So you can choose 2, 1 for the morning and 1 for the afternoon, but the choice is among 3. So 3 options in the morning, 3 options in the afternoon, out of which you can only choose 1. And then anything that you are not able to follow during the face-to-face, you will be able to follow online because we're working to make sure that every thematic track is offered in both formats so that nobody feels like they are missing out because of not being able to be in three places at once. Heidi, do you want to try again?
Oh, Mickey, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear. So
Okay.
I will let
Can
you
the
take over.
translators hear me?
I'm looking at my screen. I don't see Claudia on my screen. Can someone confirm
Hopefully they
if
can.
yes?
Yes, Claudia confirmed.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much. Okay, so Heidi,
Awesome.
I will let you take it away, a little bit
Okay.
about yourself and then guide us into the
Yeah.
main challenges.
Yeah. So, hi everyone. Good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are. And thanks to ITCILO for having me. It's great to be here. So, the starting trouble that we've had with technology, that is a really great introduction. And I do not take this, I'm not joking about this. I'm making a very serious point. Um, Although it wasn't planned, the whole saga we just had with technology and the malfunction is symptomatic of the larger digitalization agenda that affects vulnerable labor migrants. So here we are in a very privileged position. People like the ITCILO and myself, as a professor in University of London, and all of you joining from around the world, and we've had trouble dealing with this technology. So put yourself in the shoes of a vulnerable, marginalized labor migrant with little education, not like me, someone like me, but someone with very little education and very little digital literacy and understanding. And then imagine how they deal with the technification, the appification, or the digitalization of their existence in both the country of origin and in the destination. So I think that kind of presents a stark reality, and so hopefully that gives you a sense of who my perspective. I really want to use this session to talk about digitalization from the perspective of the migrant, of the labor migrant, because that's my experience in terms of my research and practice. And I want to just take a few minutes to take you through this. I'm sorry that I haven't been able to share the slides with you, but this is not really slides about the session as such. This is slides for me, and I just wanted to share something about me. So, as Mickey said, I'm a professor at Royal Holloway University of London. Um, and essentially, what I want to do is to say a few words about digital tech in the context of migration. Now, you are the experts when it comes to migrants, labor migrants. That's what you're here for, right? So, what I bring to the equation is, the interplay, the nexus between technology and migration, and perhaps inequality. And I know some of you are researchers, some of you are policymakers, some of you actually advocate for migrants, so you probably have experience in this area. And I would love to learn from you, and I think participants will learn from each other as well. So please do feel free to share. I can't see the chat, or I can only focus on a couple of things at most. So if at all, so I'm going to rely on Mickey and others to help me with that. So I'll talk a little bit about migration, talk a little bit about my project, which is funded by the British government. It was called MIDEC, which is Migration for Development and Equality. And I've been working in this space for the last 6 years. Okay, that's the background I bring to this session. And I want to then spend 10 minutes on a group activity where I'd like you to go into groups and discuss amongst yourselves. I know most of you haven't met, you don't know each other, but maybe it's a good opportunity to say a few words to each other, 10 minutes, and then we come back. And then we go on to the core of the session. We've agreed some questions in advance. And of course, I'm open to any comments, feedback, questions from you. And of course, sharing your experiences, which would be really valuable for me and for the other participants. So, are we doing okay so far? Okay, thanks, Mickey. I can only see you for some reason. I'm going to leave it like that. So, okay, this is digitalization 101 in a sense. And there might be experts on technology here who probably know more about tech than I do. Okay, so, but I just nevertheless want to present digitalization not as a technical phenomena, right? I mean, it's not about technology at all in a sense. If you have the money, you can purchase the technology. It's really about the people and process. So tech and digital transformation really is about it's a socio-technical phenomenon. It's not really the end goal. The governments and organizations talk about, oh, we need to digitally transform. We need to use all of these new technologies. But actually, it is only a means to achieve something else. And that something else is the important thing here. And for us in the Labor Migration Academy today, it is about serving the needs of the labor migrant. I think that's the perspective I bring. I know you represent governments and organizations. I think there are lots of people evangelizing to you about what technology can do. But I think the perspective that I want us to think about today is, what does it do for migrants? Remember, technology has unintended consequences, right? And so we need to have responsible digital interventions in this context, especially marginalized people that we're dealing with. Okay, so that's the broad context of digital transformation I wanted to highlight. And then briefly, the context of migration and tech. This is really a supercharged area now. The whole world is concerned about migration. But of course, forever humanity, we've been moving, right? So, but of course, now it's a challenge for governments, particularly in the West. But actually, as my research has been, especially in the global South, and Mickey said there are some of you from parts of the so-called global South, which itself is a problematic term, as you know. You might not be in the South, but you might be, a resort staff context. So the last 6 years or so, I've been working in this area. So the biggest flows in the world are between poor countries. And not many people talk about that. And that's really important. So that's the context that I bring here. So migration increasingly is not merely a social or a political issue. It's a technological aspect too. There is a technological dimension, right? And we talked about the connected migrant, the person who is both here now, let's say in Italy, where he is, but also there, let's say Tunisia, where they're from, right? So they're both in two places because of technology. So it's hugely useful, potentially, huge potential for emancipation, for connection, for love, for feeling connected with friends and family. But equally, there are significant negative issues, right? Control, tracking, surveillance, exploitation, new modes of exploitation, which are even more insidious than physical exploitation that we used to deal with before. Physical exploitation was easier to see. You could see it. But digital exploitation is somewhere out there in the ether. You can't really see it very often. And that's even more challenging. So all of this is happening in the context of structural inequalities, right? So gender-based inequalities, class-based inequalities, all sorts. And these things help determine how we use technology. So, yeah, all of the access and the use and outcomes that we see in the world with technology is often socially contingent. And that means if there are structural inequalities already, so example, girls have less access to phones than boys, well, digitalization is going to exacerbate that inequality because, you've created a new layer of inequality. So there are all sorts of challenges here. And of course, migrants are being subjected to datafication, technology use from governments, from family members surveilling, especially husbands surveilling wives. For instance, we see a lot of evidence for that. Employers who want, to comply with audits and so on, use technology, but migrants have no say. Humanitarian agencies who think it's okay to ask for your, iris imprint or your biometrics simply because they can. They want to use blockchain where Excel spreadsheets might do. So experimentation on migrants because they don't have much power or agency, right? So we can do whatever we want with them. So let's experiment. That's the situation we are in. So in this context, there was a 5-year British government project on South-South migration, inequality and development, also called MIDEC, or Migration for Development Equality, and we had a work package within that, which was an intervention work package on technology and migration. So that's kind of background over the last few years. So we did a number of things, a lot during COVID. Some of it was online, a lot of it was face to face, like in the later stages. So we worked. The most important thing I want to say is we worked with migrants. and migrant organizations in a number of countries that we worked in. So Nepal, Malaysia, Haiti, Brazil, Ethiopia, South Africa, Ghana, and so on. So we undertook research in a number of countries, and we undertook interventions in Nepal and South Africa. And more recently, I've extended the work to Brazil, to a broader group of vulnerable groups. So I think I won't go into too much detail with the slide, but essentially I want to say digital tech has a Janus effect. You know, Janus, the god of beginnings and ends, you know, Roman god of beginnings and ends. And we kind of use it to represent the positives and the negatives of technology in a sense. So you have all the benefits that technology gives you and me, and I think we have a sense of that. But then there are lots of disbenefits, familial pressure, surveillance, negative effects, xenophobia online, misinformation, you know, and so on. And ultimately, technology doesn't solve the structural problems that migrants face, right? That's a key issue. And one key thing that we found, very few migrants use so-called migrant apps. So some of you may be familiar with migrant apps. You know, IOM has one, ICRC has one. There are a number of organizations around the world, countries, civil society, humanitarian organizations that develop these so-called apps for migrants. But our research that we talked to thousands of people in South America, in Africa, and in Asia, very few had used any of these apps. So the key findings overall, you know, let's not waste too much money on so-called migrant apps because there are apps that some people think are migrant apps, Facebook and WhatsApp, right? So, you know, that's what some people think are migrant apps. You know, migrants are people like us. They use things that you and I use. If you develop something pre-designed, customized for them, they're not going to want to use them. They don't trust them. They don't understand how to use them. You know, phones may not have capacity. They don't have training. There is no advocacy for them. There's no continuous maintenance or updates. So sustainability is questionable. So that's the background we have for these things. So, and that's a huge issue. Cost is another issue in terms of access and reliable access. Trusted information is key. And most importantly, in 2025, we still find the need to engage people, to develop literacy campaigns on safe, wise, and secure use of tech. So in 2025, this is still a challenge. So, you know, it's for everyone, right? I mean, for you and I, we might be subject to fraud digitally, right? So you can imagine poor, vulnerable people. You know, this is a huge issue. And I think any tech intervention that any governments here want to do need to start with that, with education, with capacity building. And I know that's common sense, but we'll be surprised to see how often it doesn't happen. So digital capacity and resilience. So our focus was working with migrants and migrant groups in Nepal and South Africa to develop a number of interventions with them. But the focus really was on training in multiple languages, developing capacity, public service announcements, using culturally resonant methods like folk music and so on, community radio, developing skills for migrants to communicate their own stories, tell their own stories. You know, we created a documentary film, lots of short form videos. Some of the migrants we trained are now training other people. In Nepal, some of the resources we created are being used, or the National Migrant Resource Council have agreed to use some of our resources. So that's the kind of engagement we have, you know, with some of the partners that we're working with. And of course, now I'm engaging with ILO, GFMD, Public Employment Services Organization, community radio, and so on. So very much my work and background has been practice and research. So not just research somewhere up there, not really engaging with the reality on the ground, but really working in partnership with organizations. So that's what I wanted to say about myself, and I'm going to skip some of these slides and come to now to you. So I want to break the ice by giving you 10 minutes to think about one digitalization example that you are familiar with. You know, in your groups, maybe pick one, somebody just volunteer, please, and talk about one example from your background that you're familiar with, and think about the strengths and weaknesses. And then let's come back and share a few. And I know we don't have time for everyone to contribute, but it'll be great to hear at least one point from each group. And so then I hear your voice. Right now, I'm just hearing mine. Okay, so shall we go ahead, Nikki? Is that okay?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, Hari, for this introduction. I'm going to ask colleagues who haven't done so to please, if they can, rename themselves in Zoom, adding the language, their preferred language of work, before their name. So I'm looking, for example, I see top of my list, the first person that I have is Abdelkrim Belkadi. Monsieur Belkadi is French speaker, so I will ask him to put FR for French before the start of his name or after or at the end of his name, so that my colleague Leo, who is preparing the breakout rooms, can support in creating breakout rooms that correspond to your language preference. This is because there will be no interpretation in the breakout room. So I see that some of you have already very kindly done that. Leo, let me know more or less when you are good to go. In the meantime, I'm going to give a couple of more indications to the colleagues about what will happen when the breakout rooms are opened. You will see a button on your screen that it's going to pop up in front of you and it says join breakout room. So click on join, either join or okay. I don't remember at this time. You will be directed right away to the breakout room that you will be assigned to. Inside the breakout room, everything is going to be set up the same as in the main virtual room of Zoom where we are right now. So you will be able to interact with your colleagues. I will ask one of you per group to sort of act as facilitator, try and guide the discussion and then report back when we come back, but it's up to you how you want to organize. So it can be anyone in the group. And then at the end of the 10 minutes, the breakout rooms are going to close automatically. So automatically the connection will be changed, so to speak, and you will be brought back to the plenary where we will be waiting. Leo,
Thank
where are
you.
we?
Just sharing my updates. I see that some participants have already renamed themselves, and I was supporting as well. I just created the two breakout rooms. So one is going to be named English, the other one Français.
Fantastic.
And actually, those breakout rooms are available for participants to choose where to go. So
Okay.
you just need to click on the language. I hope this will help things to be easier for everyone. And if we're ready, I can already open the breakout rooms. And participants, we thank you in advance for confirming that you actually can choose. And if this works, see you on the next
On
rooms
the other side.
on the other
Fantastic. Thank you
side.
so much, Leo. And we'll be joining also to check that everything is going well. But I do see the choice now in
Okay.
front of me, so it should work. So make sure to select, and I see that some of you have already done so. Select the one that corresponds to your language of preference. Fantastic. Thank you, and see you in 10 minutes or so.
Okay. So Mickey,
Yes.
Leo, so is it possible for me to put this? You can see the question in the chat. Is it possible for
Yeah,
Leo to put them in those rooms as well? Because I can't
yeah,
see the
absolutely.
rooms.
Yeah, absolutely. You can't see the rooms? Okay.
So more, let's see more. A join breakout room.
Yeah,
And
so
don't want
you
so Mickey, maybe we spend 5 minutes on this
indeed.
global discussion and then we go to our questions. Yeah,
Hmm?
is that okay?
Absolutely. Sounds great.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Our participants will be back in 40
50
seconds.
seconds,
50
yes.
seconds, yes. It's automatic Zoom
Yeah.
timing.
It's funny, isn't it?
For coming back, let me remind you about the interpretation channels. And if you wish to listen to the discussion in French, please do reactivate your interpretation channel in case it has been deactivated. I briefly joined both rooms incognito. So in one case I took the floor, in the other I just sneaked in to listen, to eavesdrop on your conversation, and I could already see that there were some interesting ideas being bounced around. So let's maybe hear a few points, a few highlights of your discussions. I'm going to start with the French-speaking group first. If you have nominated or identified a spokesperson, can you share with us a little bit of the highlights of your discussions? What were some of the points that you raised in discussing this one example of digitalization in the labor migration domain, and a bit the pros and cons, the ups and downs? Do we have a rapporteur
Alors,
for the... Bonjour Yannick.
oui, bonjour Mickey, bonjour donc
Yes,
à tous les
we do.
encadreurs,
Good
aux
morning.
chers
Good
collègues
morning
participants.
to all the
Donc, je
facilitators
vais
and
présenter le travail
to
du
my
groupe des
fellow
francophones.
participants. I'm here on
Je ne sais
behalf
pas
of
si je peux
my
juste présenter ou
French-speaking
si je dois
group. I
partager
don't
mon
know
écran. Enfin,
how
est-ce que
you
c'est
would
nécessaire?
like
Non, c'est
me
bon de
to
juste
C'est pas
present.
présenter.
nécessaire,
So
parfait.
C'est pas nécessaire.
Alors,
no
en
need
termes d'avantages
for
du
presentation, for my
numérique,
presentation. Just
pardon, du
explain
numérique
what you've
justement
been
sur la
discussing so
migration
far.
de
Right.
main-d'œuvre,
So
nous
talking
avons
about
identifié
digitalization
plusieurs
with labor
avantages.
migration, we could spot
Premièrement, la simplification
many
des
strengths. First
procédures,
and
donc
foremost,
à la fois des
simplification of
procédures de
procedures.
recrutement
And when I'm in
qui sont
procedures, I'm thinking
digitalisées, ça
of
facilite beaucoup de
recruitment
choses,
procedures that
mais
can be
également
digitalized, and so
en termes
they
de
can be
simplification des
much
procédures
easier.
administratives,
But then even a
en termes
simplification of
d'accès aux services
administrative procedures,
sociaux,
because it might
de
be easier
délivrance
to
des
access social
visas, de
services, to
cotisation pour la
obtain
sécurité sociale et
visas, and to
d'autorisation de
pay
travail. On a eu
contributions for
le très bel exemple de la
social
Tunisie dans ce
protection
sens.
and
Et puis, on a la
to
disponibilité de
job
l'information
opportunities.
comme
Then, of
autre
course,
avantage.
information is
Ensuite,
much more
avec tout
available
ce qui est
than
accès
before,
instantané à
thanks
l'information.
to
Mais on a également la
real-time
facilité de plainte
digital
via les
tech, and
réseaux
then
sociaux
uh,
aujourd'hui, des cas,
simplification
par exemple,
of
de maltraitance au travail ou de travail
also
forcé. Dans
complaints,
certains cas, on va
because there are
observer
cases
que
of
certains
forced
travailleurs migrants
labor
font
and
des
ill
vidéos, les
treatment
postent sur les
where
réseaux sociaux. Vidéos sont
footages
devenues
are
virales
shot
et
through
ont pu être
mobile
secourus,
phones and
par
then
exemple.
posted on
On a
social
également comme autre
networks so
avantage
that
le
everybody
transfert
knows.
de
And then
technologies et
another
de
benefit
savoir-faire
is the
qui
transfer
est
of
plus aisé
technologies and
également
know-how, which is
grâce au
much
numérique. Et
easier thanks
enfin,
to
on a
digital
noté
tech.
les
And last but
facilités de
not least,
paiement et de
we
transfert
even
d'argent
noted that
grâce au numérique
moving
justement
and
dans les
transferring
processus
money from a country to
de
another
migration
is much
de
easier
main-d'œuvre, de transfert de fonds vers la
for
famille,
migrants.
et
So
ainsi de suite.
remittances can
En
reach the
termes
families
d'inconvénients,
much easier.
nous en avons
Of course,
noté
there are
trois
also
principaux. Déjà, la
weaknesses.
facilité de
So
diffusion
first and
de fausses
foremost,
informations,
as you
les
mentioned
arnaques à
before,
l'emploi
fake
grâce au
news,
numérique.
and
On a noté
unfortunately
également
also
la
fake
fracture
news
numérique
about
avec
job opportunities,
l'analphabétisme
and
numérique.
then
Tout le monde n'est pas au même niveau
a
en termes
sort
de
of
capacité
digital
d'utilisation
gap
du
and
numérique.
fracture,
On a noté
because
également toujours
there's a
dans
lot
la
of
fracture numérique les
technological
difficultés d'accès
illiteracy
au numérique
among
parce que
migrants
toutes
and
les
the
zones, toutes
limited
les régions du
access
monde ne sont pas
to
couvertes de la
digital
même
tech,
façon,
because unfortunately,
donc soit par le numérique ou par
some
l'accès à
regions
Internet.
of the
Et
world
enfin, on a
still
noté
lack
la perte
access to digital structures
une certaine
and
perte de connaissances et de talents
infrastructures. So
justement dans le
we
cadre
might
de la
unfortunately
prolifération numérique dans les
lose the
processus de
opportunity
migration de
and
main-d'œuvre. Merci, je parlais donc
lose
au
talents
nom du
because
groupe des
of that.
francophones.
So thank you
Merci.
very much for allowing me to
Merci
speak
Yannick,
in the
merci
name of
participants
the
francophones.
French-speaking group.
Hani, would you like to react to these initial feedback, or shall we hear from the English group first, and then we have
Let's hear everybody. Yeah, everybody. Thank you, Yannick. That was
Fantastic.
awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Yannick. I see that Anna will take the lead for the English-speaking group. So Anna, over to you. We're happy to listen.
Anna, you're muted.
Yes, we can see you're speaking, but you're muted.
It's called the Zoom curse. Anna, you're muted.
Still muted, yeah.
One moment, yes. Unfortunately, my child is now like creating a problem a little bit. So, yes, we discussed actually. We discussed the examples from Jordan, Kenya, India, Venezuela, and Kosovo. So we had several contributions here, and therefore I can just summarize because yes, so all these countries have systems which are established actually or in the so to say continuous advancement to connect workers and migrants to registration, to services, to jobs, or these are a kind of labor agreements. And so at the same time, while these digital and administrative platforms are advancing and offer a potential for improved protection and access, so their uptake remains limited due to low levels of trust, limited outreach, and doubts about their effectiveness and delivering tangible results. So that's in short. So to say what we discussed with the group, yes. So over to you.
Fantastic, Anna. Thank you very much. I will let you react then to the points that were raised by the two groups, Hari.
Great. Okay, so we just had the two groups, yeah?
Yes, in the end, yes.
Okay, no problem. Okay, great. Thank you so much. I think you covered pretty much some of the key issues that we're going to be discussing here. So maybe I can leave now. So absolutely, there is a lot of projects around the world, a lot of really great ideas. But when it comes to the issue of labor migrants, as you pointed out, there are some elephants in the room, as they say, right? I mean, challenge in terms of access, in terms of trust, in terms of ensuring that digital systems still coexist with human support mechanisms, the informal support mechanisms that exist, right? And which migrants are so dependent on. And when you digitalize these things, sometimes we lose sight of those informal mechanisms. So, there are challenges. Thank you, Anna and Yannick, for really excellent summaries of your discussion. So perhaps I think that was, I wanted to break the ice and also let you speak to each other a little bit to hear your voice. And this kind of makes it more human. Otherwise, we are, we are techified otherwise, so that's good. It's a great start. Thank you. Nikki, may we now move on to the discussions and then we can take inputs from our colleagues here, and share experiences and examples. As we go through, people just raise your hands or, put something in the chat. Hopefully we can respond to them as we go. Let's try and keep this interactive. I don't hold the truth about everything. I have a perspective, but I want to hear from you, your perspectives, and we learn from each other. I think that would be useful. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Hari. Thank you very much for this, let's say, initial introduction. Yannick, I see that you have raised your hand. So perhaps before we move on, I'll let you take the floor.
Merci beaucoup, Mickey.
Thank you very much, Mickey and Hari. Actually, I have a question concerning this session. I'd like Hari, if he can, to tell us how can the impact of big platform like Uber be analyzed in the light of today's situation, especially concerning migrant workers, because in the last few years we've been receiving many complaints, even from nationals, actually, not only from labor migrants. So either from nationals who know very well their own country and yet they are striving to work with these platforms, or from migrant workers. So is there any kind of way to measure this impact, and is there any way to prevent them about the different risks that might emerge from platform work? Thank you very much indeed.
Yannick, thank you. Thank you for that great question. Yes, this is a whole new way of migration, isn't it? I mean, gig work, so-called gig economy. I mean, I hate that term. It's not really a gig. if you're a vulnerable person, you know, so gigs are for pop stars and rock stars. So it's a real challenge. So what's happening with these digital platforms is that they are often claiming to be very flexible. They're claiming to offer jobs in bits and pieces to suit the lifestyle of the person doing the job. You know, that is the presentation of this. You know, these are powerful tech platforms, really huge companies, and the workers have very little power. But often, how these things start is they suck you in into the platform by offering incentives. Uber and all of the delivery and domestic work platforms around the world do this. Not just Uber, Ola, you know, a whole range of others do very similar practices. But once you're in the platform, they might slowly start squeezing you. So an Uber driver who has previously worked, let's say, 7 hours on the streets of Rio in Brazil now have to work 12 hours to make the same amount of money. So, and Uber, I speak to Uber drivers whenever I use them in any country, and you always hear that, you know, they're being squeezed. The margin that Uber takes is so much higher. And the challenge here is regulation. Tech companies are constantly changing. You know, they are advancing really fast. Governments and regulators are way behind. Now, partly because people in government don't have the capacity or the understanding of digital platforms to be able to regulate them effectively, and partly platforms see themselves as just a medium, that they don't think of themselves as an employer. But actually, that is not true, right? I mean, these platforms in effect are employers and the workers are employees. In some countries, they're winning cases in courts. You know, they have to challenge, it costs money, needs a lot of advocacy to do this. And some people are bringing Uber to court and they're winning. But it's not always the case. So there is an issue here. So there is a regulatory imbalance, there's a power imbalance. And small countries find it very hard to deal with big tech platforms. Now, why small countries? The European Union, the UK, you know, they're finding it hard despite good regulation. You know, it is very hard to hold companies to account. So this is an issue. And I think the way to deal with it from my perspective is education. You know, I think we need to have campaigns in countries to highlight some of the exploitation and potential problems that happen in these platforms. And then it's up to individuals. You know, in a free country, individuals who lack opportunities will choose to work on a platform. You know, I mean, they need to feed themselves and their families. So it's going to happen. So education is one way. But the other way is, you know, I think globally there's very disjointed practices. And I think it's very hard. America, US is making it much harder now with you know, certain politicians in power. It makes it very difficult to challenge big tech companies because there will be repercussions for those countries. So that's the issue. I want to make one more point. I have a PhD student who's studying domestic work platforms in Bangladesh, right? And it's fascinating. This is what happens pretty much everywhere with digital platforms. Where there is already a pre-existing structural inequality, digital platform simply digitalizes that inequality. For example, a platform for domestic workers, it's in the Gulf or in Singapore or Bangladesh, they mostly only recruit females. They will never recruit men. So it kind of reinforces the kind of feeling that domestic work is female work, right? I mean, it's feminine. So feminization, that's the it. So digital, it may be very progressive and modern for a lot of people, a lot of governments, a lot of organizations, but actually in practice and reality, it simply reinforces, reifies existing problems and challenges. So that's one interesting example. And many countries simply do not have regulations in place for platforms. So I'll stop there and maybe we can discuss this further as we go along.
Thank you so much. I saw that there was another raised hand which has disappeared for the moment, so perhaps we can come back to that a little bit later. And I see that Okay, no, now we have two. So if that's okay with you, Hari, I will let the participants take the lead in guiding the
Yes.
discussion. So I
Yes.
see
Of course.
Aya first and then Miriam.
Thank you, Mickey, and thank you, Harry, so much.
Hi.
I really actually wanted to thank you for your introduction because it kind of did contextualize a bit of the example that I was thinking of and what I discussed in the breakout rooms. So the main example that I'm referring to now in my points in question is the Ministry of Labor by the government of Jordan basically a few years ago launched a labor grievance platform online in different languages, like various languages of migrant workers in Jordan. And I've worked specifically on that platform for migrant workers in the garment industry in Jordan. So mostly South Asians. Now, the main issue that I think is at stake with this is basically we as researchers and activists and social workers, we've struggled a lot in walking through these migrant workers and filling up these grievances online. So what ends up happening is that we do it on their behalf most of the time,
Yeah.
which is basically not the point of this kind of socio-tech process that you just mentioned in the beginning. But the other issue, I think, in terms of inequality, is that it has left most of these employers and in the mediation phase left alone with the government, totally excluding workers. So what we see is that not just these inequalities kind of being available online, but it actually leaves room for this labor mediation happening and also in very specific kind of closed rooms where workers are completely excluded from. So all the points and everything that you're raising is kind of making me think about these points and re-questioning again. Like I've been questioning it, but now I'm
Yeah.
re-questioning like what is the point at this point? I don't understand. Is it also allowing employers and quite frankly abusers to kind of know more smartly how to kind of navigate how to secretly constantly abuse migrant workers because they know that it's being tracked on the system. So it kind of gives them that leverage to continue
Yeah.
doing so, but in just different, smarter ways, basically.
I thank you for that. Yeah, absolutely. I hear your passion for this topic, and I can understand your frustration. It is so true, and I think this is let's step back from that specific example. I will come back to you to the example, but let's step back for a second. This is precisely the core issue that I want to raise through this session. It is, some of you are already, I'm preaching to the converted, you know what we're talking about here. But for some others who are champions of tech, and I'm not anti technology, I am not a neo Luddite. I believe in tech. We are talking to each other in tech, despite the initial problems. But I'm not an evangelist, right? I understand that technology can be used to do good and it can be used to do harm. And that is the Janus effect we talked about. So some people think that if you digitalize or bring in technology, somehow we are removing corruption, we're removing exploitation. It's a very simplistic understanding, right, Aya? As you pointed out, the practice is much more complex. The practice is gray. It's not black or white. And all of these grievance mechanisms, I have a real grievance about these grievance mechanisms. And my grievance is that these simply do not take into account the context of the migrant. So, the ILO itself has worked with ITUC, right? The Trade Union Congress, International Trade, and come up with this fantastic grievance mechanism called recruitment advising. Now, in principle, it's a really great idea to crowdsource, right? To source lots of views from people. Crowdsourcing. That's the idea of crowdsourcing. For those of you who are not familiar with the term, so you get lots of feedback from lots of migrant laborers, and then that, even if there are some fake reviews and so on, you get a general idea about the employer. But the challenge here is power imbalance. It's not, this is not TripAdvisor. Like Aya or myself or Mickey or Leo or Yannick or Abdul Rahman, all of, it's people like us who might go and stay somewhere in a hotel and write a review. That's okay. But if you're a labor migrant with very little and who fear for your job every day, it is completely unrealistic to expect that person to go and complain about their employer, even with data protection practices in place, right? Because there are ways to break them. A great example is a recent employee of Nike's supply chain complaining, and the next thing he finds that he has no job. How did that happen? He was supposed to be anonymous supply chain, kind of grievance mechanism. So it's a challenge. Intermediaries simply go online. So fundamentally, we need to address the structural issues here. And so simply digitalizing something doesn't make anything better. As Aya, you said, you still need intermediaries like Migrant Forum Asia in Asia, or you in Jordan, activists and advocates to write on behalf of the migrants who may not be able to access support. And of course, that means it's subject to interpretation by multiple people. And then, of course, the intermediaries simply disappear into ether. They disappear online. The exploitation that was visible before now is invisible. So if there is a grievance mechanism, or let's say, let's take the example of recruitment practices that are online now. So we have disintermediated, that's the term you hear. We are now connecting migrants directly to, recruiters and jobs. Well, there is still a digital intermediary who will then control their profiles, who will then have complete access to multiple profiles of migrants. So it doesn't really solve the problem, And then regulatory bodies think, oh, we now have a digital system, so there's no corruption or exploitation here. So they don't look at these things very carefully. So I think what we have to do here is to say it's not enough. There is a place for these things, but we need to understand the context. I mean, can we really use this effectively in a context where there is such power imbalance? We can't. It's not like using a complaint mechanism in Coca-Cola or the ILO or at my university. It's very different, right? So I think that's the challenge we have here. It's harder to audit when this kind of intermediation moves online. And so it creates new challenges for regulators to understand that. So I think we still need, so I will always go back to human support mechanism and education, without which you can't. And that has to start at pre-departure. So I think there's almost, many governments depend on migrant remittances, right? Many governments really depend on them to keep their economy afloat. And these governments should have a responsibility to train these people before they leave. So pre-departure orientation programs where digital literacy, basic use of technology, safe, wise, secure. That was our priority in our interventions, and migrant resource centers that ILO has supported to establish in many countries are a great way to do that, I think. And that's fundamental. And I know this seems like going back to basics, but I'm afraid it is going back to basics because
Thank you,
our
Hari. Sorry, just trying to ask on behalf of the interpreters if you can slow down a little bit. I understand that you're very passionate about the topic and it really comes through. But if you could slow down slightly, the interpreters would
Okay, thanks, Miki.
particularly appreciate it. And sorry for interrupting. I see
No,
that we
that's
have
okay.
4 raised hands. And then 1 comment in the chat. So in the interest of time, because I want to try and make sure that everybody gets a say, I'm going to ask maybe Miriam and Hisham, if you can go with we can take 2 and then the other 2, and then I'll take the comment in the chat. But Miriam first and then Hisham.
Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are. My name is Miriam from Kenya. I come from the private sector. I'm a recruitment agent from Kenya. So for mine is a positive on the positive effect on the digitalization on migration. We have a platform between Kenya and Saudi. I think it's a Saudi platform that each country that recruits for them, it's called the Musanid system for domestic workers. And also for both genders, men and women who are going to work in the domestic, may it be a driver or a female house help or teacher. So this system helps us to keep track of our candidates, and also it helps us to report of issues and problems. And sometimes on the positive side, we are able to get quick assistance when we have domestic or cry distress cases from our candidates. Also, we have another platform for skilled labor that's called the Injaz. So the Injas portal, where you can be able to track on how many candidates you've taken, and we through the NEAMIS portal, we are able to file our returns, annual returns of how many candidates have taken, and through this portal, it is very easy compared to before 2014 when we didn't have a proper bilateral agreements between the two countries. So I would say that this is one of the positive changes that, as a private sector person, it gives us an easy transition of work between private recruitment agents from Kenya and private recruitment agents from Saudi Arabia. Thank you.
Thank you, Miriam, for sharing that really great example.
Hadi, before you react, can I just get the question from Hisham? So we'll
Yes.
collect a few, and in the interest of time, we can speed that along. Apologies for
Okay.
interrupting. Hisham, over to
That's
you.
fine.
Very
Yeah.
good. We can see you, but we cannot hear you yet. I think your microphone is muted, Hisham.
Oui. Bonjour.
Bonjour.
Good morning.
Bonjour à tous. Merci, Miki.
Good morning, and thank you, Miki. It's nice to see you again. I'm Isham Ashabi of the Multilateral Agreements Ministry of Employment in Morocco. I would like to thank Mr. Hari, and I'd like to ask you a question. Can you share with us your experience on studies concerning the use of digitalization in order to have some figures about women migrants or men migrants. So in order to make a distinction and to know how many migrant men and how many migrant women. And then the second question, we would like to know if you had the opportunity to know more about the right of disconnection, because you mentioned the example of Uber, they work more than 10 hours. Is there a digital tool allowing to understand how many hours have to be worked, and are there some rights to disconnection? Because anyway, this is a vulnerable population, those who work through platforms, and we have to think about them. Thank you.
I will let the
Thank you,
interpreters.
Isham.
Okay, fantastic. So Hadi, if you want to react to these first 2 points, and then I'm going to go to Aswadi and to Sadiq.
Yeah, okay, thanks. Miriam, thank you for your example from the bilateral arrangements between Kenya and Saudi. It's a good example, and I appreciate that this is working well for you, and that's good. And it's great to see a recruitment agency here in the academy. I think we have to have, not just governments, but people like you also in the mix. So it's great to see you. Musanad, I've read a little bit about that. I haven't done any studies about them, but they are kind of similar to a number of platforms several countries have. But the challenge I have with such platforms is that, and there's always a challenge, there's always something in the background. It is the fact that there is a huge power imbalance between employers and workers, like domestic workers and drivers and so on, in many contexts. And I don't want to pick on any particular context, but the fact is that, in platforms like this, the employee can simply digitally switch off their exits. So, and although, it does more than that, there are real imbalances in the way data is treated within the platforms. And I'm not sure workers have full access to the data that's held about them, and whether there is any recourse to data justice in many of these platforms, not necessarily Mustanet on its own. So, yes, the seamless connectivity and the efficiency of contracts and the very quick way of licensing and getting permissions and visa, all of those are very positives. But when something goes wrong on the ground, when there is a physical employment situation, not a digital employment, a physical employment exploitation, I'm not sure how helpful some of these platforms are. And then you need to have you need to address the structural issues. So you need really people like you and your government advocating for those employees. And that's a challenge that I still find with a lot of these platforms. And Hisham, your point, gender-based statistics, disaggregated statistics. I think ILO and many other organizations collect those data, and governments collect those data. So, yeah, and you're absolutely right to talk about the gender, number of male and female. And so it's very important to see the disaggregated data because, if you don't have the disaggregation, it hides a lot of problems. But my understanding is that, there are statistics agencies in most countries who collect these sorts of data, and ILO in particular collects data on labor migrants. And in terms of Uber and the number of hours worked, yeah, I mean, Uber has a system that collects the number of hours. It shows. The problem is the worker, if they just shut off after a few hours, they lose. And if you say no repeatedly to the digital platform, so let's say somebody wants you to drive them and you reject the request, and you reject the request of the next person who wants to be driven, and the next one, your rating within the platform starts to fall dramatically. So there's only so much you can say in relation to, oh, I don't want to work because I'm tired. I want to switch off. It's much harder. Same thing with the domestic worker platforms. So in Bangladesh, we found that if a domestic worker says, I know I don't want to do this job, her profile and her rating immediately gets downgraded. Right? So this has real consequence for the worker. Right? So the workers simply don't have the power in these platforms. And it needs proper regulation to enforce number of hours. Now, it's very well, Hisham, for you and me to say, don't work 12 hours. It's unsafe. It's bad for you. But they need to work the 12 hours to make the money to feed themselves. So, what is it? What is the decision? Where is the choice? Should we go to the next one, Mickey?
Yes, indeed. Thank you so much. So, Eswari, good to see you again. Over to you, and then Cedric.
Hi, Mickey. Hi, Hari. Nice to meet both of
Hi,
you.
Ishri.
So I'd just like to say, because you mentioned Migrant Forum in Asia, and I worked for them for about 5 years before. I have a question, first of all. Just following up from Aya's comment earlier, I just wanted to ask how well are current digital wage protection systems working? Because I know that it's easy to obviously track whether a worker has been paid. I'm just not sure how well it's being implemented. And it's something I don't have much of a touch with right now. So I just wanted to know how that's working. Another thing that I just wanted to talk about was I just wanted to comment on some of the things that I observed previously when I was doing my studies. We worked with a government in the Middle East on pre-departure orientation and pre-departure and post-arrival orientation for migrant workers. And so what we did find was one of the major challenges that workers had, especially those who reside in labor camps, for example, was that one major challenge of digital platforms not working was their access to network itself, like accessing internet, accessing data plans, and also the fact that even if their internet, let's say they have a Wi-Fi that's provided by their employer, it's restricted. The websites they can access is restricted. And in many cases, obviously, many of these grievance redressal mechanisms are also restricted to them. So they're unable to access them and also report their cases. I just also wanted to speak because someone asked about domestic workers. Someone spoke about domestic workers. We did some work with Tadbir in the UAE for domestic workers. A Tadbir is kind of like a system where a government system where you can recruit domestic workers from. It's kind of like a platform for both domestic workers to apply and also for employers to gain access to them. A major issue that we found with one of the grievance redressal mechanisms that they had was that domestic workers could report the issues that they face at the workplace, where they stay also, on the app, or they have to report it on the app that's provided. But the way the issues are resolved are at these tadbir centers.
Right.
So the issues are being resolved in person, but it's reported on the app. And so what happens is then we cannot track how these issues are being resolved, whether these issues are being resolved in favor of the migrant worker, whether she's being deported, whether she's actually being paid, or whether, these issues are being sorted, and what is the precedent of previous issues that have been sorted. Yeah, this is just some of the comments that I had, and obviously that's just that question on wage protection systems. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Cedric, over to you.
Okay.
Bien, bonjour tout le monde. Je suis Cédric Ntamboué de la République démocratique du Congo.
Good morning. I speak from
Déjà
Togo.
dire merci à
And first and
professeur Henri
foremost,
pour
may I
ses
thank
cours
Harry
et surtout pour
for
cette idée
his
donnée
interesting
par
presentation
Alexandre. Et
and
surtout, merci
interaction
d'avoir
with us.
organisé
So
cette discussion
thanks
en ligne. Ça nous a
for
vraiment aidé d'avoir
being
des
with
idées plus
us.
claires sur le
So
sujet.
we
Mais quand même, ma
really need to
question est
have
la
clearer
suivante.
ideas
L'année passée, en
about it. But I
2014,
have a question.
l'Amnesty International
In
a fait un rapport où ça
2014,
qu'il a
there
trouvé
was an international report.
L'Amnesty International a parlé a demandé au pays de pouvoir
Concerning the possibility
l'utilisation de la plateforme technologique dans les frontières.
of the
Alors, j'aimerais
countries
savoir
to
quelle est la position, soit le mandat de l'OIT par rapport
use
là. Je sais pas vraiment
technology
si c'est une question qui sera
to
pour
watch
M. Henry ou soit pour
what
Miki.
migrants
Merci
do
beaucoup.
and to follow
Just
up
because the
with
audio
their
was a little
yes,
bit
but
broken up on my
I'm really
side,
sorry, but it was
my
very difficult to
understanding is that your
understand what
question was
he
related to
was
the use of
saying.
technologies in border management. Is that correct?
Mickey, it was very difficult to hear the translation plus Cedric. I think there was a challenge there. So were you talking to Cedric there, Mickey?
I was asking Cedric to confirm whether the question, the way that I understood it, but the sound was quite broken up. So the way that I understood it was related to the use of digital technologies in border management and border control, and whether there was a role under the ILO mandate, or role for the ILO in also working in this area, which is more security oriented rather than linked to the labor market, from what I understand. But is that correct? That was your question?
Était plutôt orienté vers la sécurité. Je me suis basé
Yes.
sur un rapport que j'ai lu de Amnesty International.
Unfortunately, the audio is so bad,
Okay,
we cannot hear it.
By
I'm
Amnesty
sorry.
International.
I'm sorry.
Oui, qu'il y avait une discussion comme ça lors de la 113e session à la conférence internationale du travail. Je n'ai
So
pas
the
encore,
ILO
j'ai pas
talked
encore
about
lu
it
le
at
rapport
the
de
International Labour
cette
Conference in 2014, if I'm not mistaken. So can you tell us about it?
Okay, so Hadi, if you will allow me, I have not read the report, so because I understand that there was a little bit of indecision whether the question was rather addressed to you, Hadi, or more to me directly. I have to admit I have not read the report. What I can do is take a look at it, and so I can be better, I think, equipped to answer your question once you are here in Turin. I can do a little bit of homework on the side and then try to address this more effectively once you're here. But it is indeed an interesting point that you have raised. Hadi, I don't know if you have any reactions to this and to the points previously raised.
Yeah, Cedric, thank you. I'm sorry I couldn't follow everything that was being said, but I think following on from Mickey, if I understand correctly, yes, there are obviously guidance and principles that ILO and a number of other UN and other organizations have come up with about the use of technology in border management. But by all accounts, what we see is a lack of transparency in this area. I mean, the European Union, Canada, Australia, UK, the US, all of these countries use technology for border management. I mean, in fact, there's a whole literature on border tech, right? And it is all about restrictions it really isn't very compassionate at all, despite all sorts of UN conventions. So, yeah, I mean, I firmly fall on the side of the migrant here. I know governments have to control their borders. I know that's important, especially in the current circumstances of, all sorts of challenges that countries are facing, terrorism, and so on and so forth. But I think there is very, very indiscriminate use of technologies like AI. There is, the EU, for instance, uses heat mapping technologies, with drones. So it's all about enforcement and keeping people away. It's not a compassionate approach to migration, and migration is here to stay. It is only going to increase. So we need other methods of dealing with this. We need political negotiations and discussions. I don't think drones are going to be the solution. Migrants still will keep coming. So, and I want to go back to, so thank you, Cedric, for that. Ishri, you made lots of interesting comments there. In terms of, I think the first one you would ask about wage protection systems, digital wage protection systems. I could, yeah, interesting, because on the one hand, when you digitalize things, you should be able to see when someone's paid. But you worked in the Middle East and you worked in other contexts. You've worked with Migrant Forum Asia. I mean, I absolutely love William. So if you speak to William, say hello. So there is a lot of evidence that wage protection systems, it's only worth the paper or the code it's written on. If it's digitalized, the code, or if it's on paper, the paper, it's only worth it if there is actual intention behind it to actually ensure there is no wage theft. There are many examples in several rich countries where employers use the system and then force workers to pay back. So there are multiple different arrangements. So digitalization doesn't solve the problem. So this is the challenge we have here. Digital is not a panacea for, real exploitative practices. Just by putting a computer in place doesn't change anything, right? I mean, we're human beings, we are smart. We will find workarounds. And especially if there's exploitative environments, so that's what's going to happen. So my understanding is, yes, wage protection systems can work brilliantly, but you need willingness to make it work. And you need third-party independent audits. That doesn't happen very often. So a lot of the audits are called, oh, we have independent audits. Well, is it really a third party actually doing it? I don't think so in many of these cases. So you never really hear the story. And thank you for your comment about pre-departure, post-arrival issues in training and so on. I mean, can you imagine, some of us have been through some big hub airports, right? And you see these poor migrants, and I know I'm talking about them in the way like they have no voice or power. Of course, human beings, we all have voice and power, in ourselves, but our structural systems constrain us. And you see people being treated like cattle, right? Worse than cattle in some of these airports. And imagine those people, they arrive, they are subject to a lot of information. And before they leave their country, they're subject to a lot of information. It's just, they don't really hold on to any of that information. It's not very useful. We have to find other mechanisms of engaging with these people on a continuous basis, not just a one-off. Thank you for the example of that beer. But you do realize that there have been examples of domestic workers being sold online in some countries. So that's an example for digital, right? In labor governance. So some countries have digital platforms to recruit, to reduce corruption, exploitation. But then what do the employers do? They sell their female domestic workers on through other platforms. I mean, blatantly on Instagram and so on. And there have been reports about it. So yeah, it's a serious issue. And the example of the grievance app and then the resolution in person, I see what would you say? The idea that you resolve them face to face, so you never hear what happens later on, and that is a challenge. So I think these are all it's a facade. It's not really meant to address the real problems migrants face. So I think I would challenge, and I hope all of you here are challenge some of the digital efforts that are ongoing. There is a place for tech, but you need to ask the tough questions whether this really is safeguarding migrants, whether it's really safe for vulnerable migrants, or is it just fair for employers, for governments, for intermediaries? Is it really fair for migrants? That's a question I want all of you to raise whenever you're in a discussion about digital tech in this context. Mickey?
Thank you, Hari. Thank you so much. And there's one point in the chat linked also to this grievance mechanisms, and it's a point raised by Muriel saying that the language barrier may often be an issue for some of us. English or French is not our first language. We may have our mother tongue, then a national language, and English and French is either the third or the fourth. So in those cases, are there ways that we can provide effective and friendly and user-friendly digital mechanisms to support our workers to ensure, again, that we keep this sort of human-centered approach in the discussion? Muriel, I saw that you have raised your hand and now you've taken it out. So if you wanted to add anything to this, please let me know. Thank you.
Thank you, Mickey. Yes, I think you've rightly read the question. And in the case of Vanuatu, Vanuatu is a little teeny island in the Pacific, but English and French is not our first language. And we have over 100 different dialects, and English and French might be the fourth or fifth language. So in the case of our migrant workers, they are recruited right from the very remote villages of Vanuatu, and allowing them to travel to a developed country like Australia and New Zealand, it will be a cultural shock for them. So when it comes to raising those grievances, these people, our countrymen and women, they are not familiar with the use of digitalization. And so for them, it's a bit, challenging. So my question again is, how can we simplify very simple digitalization tools that can help them to, friendly user and give them back that confidence that what they will be raising, noting those language barrier will be effectively managed by those welfare support systems in the country of destination. Thank you.
Yeah, Muriel, thank you. So Mickey, can I respond to that?
Yes, just before you do, two quick points that I'm also seeing in the chat. One is related to the regulation of recruitment agencies in the digital domain. And I wanted to put a pin on this because this is something that is going to come up both in the knowledge field that we're going to share towards the end of this week, that is going to look at digitalization in the recruitment process at large. So just for the person who has raised the point in the chat, we'll discuss this a little bit further, both in the online elective, both in the fair recruitment elective and in the knowledge field that we're going to share. And there was another question about, do we have any examples that are related specifically to migrant workers in situations of crisis or of forced displacement? And I have shared a number of resources because there has been a lot of work done specifically under the Prospects Partnership with the creation of a number of digital learning labs, looking at different aspects of livelihood opportunities in the digital realm and what some of the protection gaps may be in those contexts as well. So you will find those links in the chat. For the moment, the learning labs are available in English only. But if there's any of those that are particularly relevant or particularly interesting to you, feel free to get in touch. We can do our best to make sure that they are accessible, at least a summary of it in French as well. On the other hand, there is a toolkit that looks at, if I'm not mistaken, opportunities in the platform economy for refugees and host communities. And in that case, the toolkit is available in 4 languages. So please go ahead and take a look at that in detail. I see that we have 2 more raised hands. So for the sake of time, I'll let you maybe react quickly to Muriel's point, and then very quickly from Anna and Monsieur Ben Abdallah. Thank you, Ari.
Thanks, Mickey. Thanks, Muriel, for your point. And thank you, because you raised a very important issue. It's about accessibility, right? I mean, language is just one aspect of accessibility, right? If you don't understand the language, what the hell do you do, right? So yeah, a lot of these applications are in English or some major Western language rather than many others. So the language of the migrant. So I think the way to address this, they have some examples. I mean, for instance, a price is a supply chain exploitation kind of audit app. It's called a price, and I think it was UNU Macau developed it, United Nations University, and they use very simple icons, so no real text, but icons to be able to universal icons in a sense to allow migrants to choose, to show whether their working conditions are acceptable or not, and so on. But again, that's one particular example, and there are lots of challenges, even with the use of a platform like a Price, right? You need, technology is really an ensemble. Technology is one part of a broader equation of things. You need, lots of things around the technology to make the technology work. And, so we hear about great tech stories, success stories in the world, right? That happens when you have the technology, but you have the people, the process, the infrastructure, the support mechanisms all working together, the regulation, all of this is a huge challenge. It requires a lot of investment, a lot of thinking, a lot of coming together. Lots of governments work in silos still. So we need to integrate those different aspects. You need data integration. A lot of the data is fragmented. So in this context, it's very hard to achieve those sorts of approaches. But I want to come back to the language issue, but also accessibility. So a lot of the applications are QR codes or biometrics. These are very challenging for people with disabilities, right? I mean, if you can't hold the phone to focus the QR code, you can't access the app. Or you may have motor skills issues or other impairments. So I think there are real guidelines, as Marion pointed out to me earlier on when the call was starting. I mean, there are there are great examples and good practices. I don't like using the word best practice. There is no best practice. There are lots of good practices we can learn from. So there are lots of good practices in accessibility that a lot of these so-called apps simply don't have. And I think the way to deal with them is working with the migrant. The migrants, they know migration best. They know their challenges best. So co-creation, co-designing with them might be a solution. But of course, how many governments are willing to do that? I think we really need to champion. Advocates here for migrants need to champion, but we need to have migrants in the room to discuss with the people that are involved. And then you get applications or websites or resources that are actually meaningful and contextually relevant. So I think that's a really important issue.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Hadi. Thank you so much, Hadi. Thank you, Muriel, also for raising the points. But thank you really to all of you for the really insightful and interesting questions that you have raised. We are a little bit over time, but we have two more raised hands. So if you'll allow me, Hadi, I'll just take these two last raised hands quickly.
Yes.
We can respond in a couple of minutes, and then we wrap up with a little bit of delay, but not too much. So Anna, thank you for waiting patiently. I'll go to you first, and then Monsieur Ben Abdallah from Tunisia.
Thank you very much. So I will try to be fast. So my question is that AI is really very rapidly evolving. And for example, what AI cannot do yesterday, it can do this today. So, and therefore with this, so I would like also to understand the challenges, because now, for example, you discussed also, yes, about these languages of the apps, but I think so very fast this can be solved. But I see some other things that like as of now, I don't see the solution. This is impersonalization, so to say that, for example, many authorities and companies will adjust and have already adjusted their systems, for example, for registration in such a way that it's already filtering, for example, people. And as more we will have all this digitalization and AI-based tools, for example, just accepting migrants or something like that, giving them certain allowance, and the more ticks will be in the system, for example, like this person is going on this way, or this person is like not receiving any allowance to be in this country, or get the permit this type or this type. So, and then the person has no voice to really express and just receive the decision. And the same I see, for example, currently in the recruitment process. So because like for companies, it is easier to adjust the systems than it is for the state. So, and therefore now companies probably they are also experimenting, but they also do not understand well, and they also face the challenge that they, for example, started to receive too many high quality applications, so to say, but how they are recruiting people. So this is a question. If there is a tick in the system that I don't take the migrant with this particular background, then it doesn't matter how good is this migrant. So they will never see this migrant because just the system filters. And then, so like, is there any already discussions or so streams of work in this fair recruitment process exactly for the migrant and for the vulnerable groups such as refugees? Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Hadi, before you reply, maybe I'll just let Monsieur Amin Ben Abdallah pose his question, and then we can get the reactions together, if you'll allow me. Thank you.
Merci à vous.
Thank you.
Donc, je me présente, je suis Amin Ben Abdallah.
I'm Amin Ben Abdallah. I'm Director of International Cooperation and in Tunisia for the Caisse de Sécurité Sociale. I deal with the follow-up and the implementation of the bilateral convention protecting migrant workers. So I'd like to speak about the management of migration and the role of digitalization in the process and in the protection of the rights of workers. According to my experience, digitalization is a need anyway. It's a prerequisite, an essential one, because exchanges are no more paper-based, and so we need digitalization since we are exchanging with a lot of countries. So we need really a way to be updated in terms of digitalization on one side. On the other side, it's true that digitalization has to play a key role also in terms of raising awareness for workers in order for them to know what are their rights. So we have this double role of digitalization.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you then, and over to you, Hari, for these 2 points.
Thank you.
Anna and Amin.
Yes, thanks. Thank you, Ben Abdullah. Can I just respond to your comments first? I mean, I don't think it was a question. You're absolutely right. Digitalization is absolutely essential for efficiency, for speed, for reducing cost. You know, those are some of the key reasons why we increasingly have to digitalize, especially with the advent of new technologies like AI, cloud computing, and so on. So that seems to be where everybody's headed to, and those are very good reasons for doing it. And of course, you know, digitalization is very useful to collect the data. You know, somebody else earlier, I think it was, can't remember who it was now, talked about the importance of collecting data. I think it was a colleague. Yeah, sorry, the name escapes me. So collecting, if you don't have enough access to data then you can't have policies that will make any difference, right? So digitalizing in the space can be very helpful in that point as well. But absolutely true. Through digital technologies, even in my own research, I found that many migrant organizations are using digital tools for advocacy, for connecting people to help where they are. So maybe to an embassy or maybe to a migrant organization's branch somewhere else and so on. So there are lots of campaigning, lots of collective action possibilities through technology, and that's a great thing. Coming back to Anna's point, Anna, you're absolutely right about AI and languages. So earlier, Muriel had talked about the lack of enough resources in the local languages. With the advancements in generative AI like ChatGPT and so on, and the apps like Duolingo and so on, there's many, many more opportunities now to use AI to translate. But is it always going to be appropriate, especially when it's technical language? It's still a challenge. And so perhaps we do need some human intermediation there still. But I think these things will become better as the technology advances. Now, I don't know how many of you have tried AI, generative AI in your mother tongues, in your native tongues. It's not always perfect, especially in the non-Western languages. So, but it will improve, as Anna was pointing out. Anna, you talked about the use of AI and algorithms in managing migration. Yes, and there's a lot of literature increasingly, especially from legal informatics scholars, from advocates, from digital human rights activists, and so on. There are real issues here because if the computer says no, you don't get in. And the computer says no, we don't know why the computer says no. Because you, as a migrant, will not have access to the information that the system holds about you. So there is no data justice, right? There is no justice here because you do not have recourse to justice. You can't challenge that data. So from a government point of view, the so-called digitalization in this area, it becomes synonymous with border control and tracking and risk profiling, right? And so any number of problems, gender, race, class, all of these things come in, right? You might say, oh, but we don't look at gender and race. But you might say, well, we don't want people from a certain country, or we don't want a certain group of people because they're known as troublemakers. Well, that's kind of profiling, isn't it? From an employer's point of view, similar things happen. They think about fit. I think was it Anna, you, or was it your previous colleague who talked about the use in recruit? I think it was you, Anna. Use of AI and so on in recruitment with large numbers of applications coming in. AI systems that then decide who to interview. And of course there could be so many biases in these systems, right? So on the one hand, you want it to be efficient process. You can't really manually go through 10,000 applications. But the problem is the algorithm may look for certain fit, and that fit might privilege men over women, or might privilege certain nationalities, might privilege certain skill set. But these things unintentionally will continue to entrench inequality. So no matter what systems we have, we need to combine that, complement that with human intermediation. So human in the loop, no matter what the AI. Increasingly, people are asking for explainable AI, XAI, but the challenge is it's not always easy to explain an algorithm, right? I mean, it's a kind of an opaque thing. But there are tools, there are technical tools that you can use. There are things like, I don't know, I don't want to go into too many technical terms, but there are ways of looking at individual features of the algorithm and then examine if that feature, when you do some changes to that feature, what the output of the system will be. So from that, you can work out, where there are biases. So there are ways of doing that. So they call bias audits, but not many governments, organizations actually do them. So that's because it's time consuming, it's expensive, and so on. So yeah, these are some of the issues. And I think ultimately, in this space, if I may, Mickey, the point about, labor migrants and digitalization, there is no point in spending a lot of resource digitalizing something if the very people who you are trying to help are disempowered by those technologies, right? It doesn't make sense. Why would we do that? Why would we create a system where the user is the least powerful? All the modern systems that you and I use in our daily lives, it is about user interface, right? Ease of use. If you don't like a system, you say, "Oh, I don't want this. I want to talk to my boss or my colleague. Let's change it." That's we have the voice, we have the agency, we can do that. But people who have constrained agency can't do. They have no voice. They don't exist as human beings in the system. They're like cogs in the big wheel, right? So I think it's important to think about how do we put the migrant back at the center? So I think responsible digital intervention. That's the key word, I'd say.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for this closure, for this closing remark. And thank you to everyone for your incredibly active participation, starting from the discussion in the breakout room, which is something that we don't necessarily always do, but I think it was a very good opportunity to break the ice and to get the conversation started. And it worked very well because the conversation did sort of take on a life of its own. We had prepared a number of questions, but we didn't get to really go through the motions of asking and answering, but I think most of the points that we were aiming to draw out came out in the discussion anyway. So from my side, it was a very interesting, very engaging session, and thank you very much. I might be also to see that there is so much interest on this topic. It's a topic that is evolving very rapidly, on which the ILO itself is asking a lot of question and is doing a lot of reflection. So I'm also happy to say that to share with you this sort of sneak peek into the calendar for next year. The ITC ILO is also working on developing a training package around digitalization in the governance of labor migration. So if you're interested in this, watch this space because new things are going to happen very soon in the first half of 2026. Excuse me. Thank you once again to Hari for taking the time to sit with us through the session today. I see that you have kindly shared your contact information as well. For the participants, you will find a copy of the slides as well as the recordings of the session today on the eCampus starting from the end of the day today. I've also collected some of the links and some of the references that I've shared in the chat so that those can also be integrated in the session page on the eCampus. Thank you also to the interpreters for the fantastic work that they're doing behind the scenes. It's not always easy, and we tend to always overstay our welcome and make our sessions a little bit longer than anticipated. So thank you so much for your patience with that. And for the rest of the participants, we will see you online again on Thursday at 2 p.m. For our session on mobility happening in the context of the adverse effects of climate change, in the context of the just transition. And
I just want to say, Nikki, thank you
please.
to all the participants. Thank you to the translators. Thank you to ILO, ITC ILO. It's been awesome to engage with all of you in the audience here. I think, I've taken away lots of notes and I hope we get to engage again. And, good luck with the Academy. And I hope you have fruitful discussions and happy to engage with any of you offline separately. So if you ever want to discuss any of these issues. And Mickey, thank you for inviting me again.
Fantastic.
Marian, thanks very
It's
much.
been a pleasure to have you online. Thank you so much, Hadi, and
Merci
hopefully
beaucoup.
see you
Thank you.
soon.
Ciao.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
everyone. See you on Thursday.
Ok. Donc, j'ai arrêté mon enregistrement. Léo, can you stop the recording, please?